Hey everybody, Roar the Lions UK. Matt and Ash here, along with guests Jack and Paul. How's everyone doing?
Doing well, doing well.
Yeah.
I'm going to ask you again in a sec. but there we go. Right, guys in the chat, we're getting set up and we are on a strict schedule. I should say schedule, shouldn't I, Ash? Because I'm trying to Americanize myself when I'm on here. We're on a strict schedule to get this bit done, and then me and Ash are going to do our own show after this bit. So we'll do our normal weekly stuff about minicamp and stuff like that afterwards. If you've got questions specifically for our guests that we need to get to before we let them go, let me know, get the ats in. We'll talk to them at the time. So I'll monitor the feeds as we go. I'm going to act as moderator somewhat. Our Vikings guy isn't here, so I'll also do the Vikings part. We're going to go Bears, Vikings, Packers, Lions, and the format's roughly going to be kind of talking about your own team, how you think it's changed, whatever you want to say, really. Then get critiqued by everyone else on your own team and fight back and, whatever. It's going to be a melee, a massacre, and I'm going to enjoy it. And then sort of 5 minutes, maybe at the end, 10 minutes at the end, how it works out to talk about kind of your expectations for the division as a whole, anything like that. And hey, everybody in the chat, Danny Mack, thank you for subscribing at tier 1, 7th month in a row. Appreciate that very much. And everyone in the chat is saying hi as well. Hey to you. We're going to get started straight away. News and whatever is coming up afterwards. Let's go.
Recording in progress.
Welcome to another edition of the Roar the Lions UK podcast, episode 274, Showdown for the North. My name's Matthew Turner alongside Ashley Soden, and I'm here with guests Jack, i.e. Bear Down Jack, returning guest from Bear Down Chicago podcast, and Paul Noonan, i.e. at Badger Noonan, who is from Acme Packing Co. We are doing an NFC North roundtable episode for you guys, but for our new guest, Paul, how are you doing?
Doing really well, other than the fact that it is Monday, but I'm glad to take some time out of my workday to do this, so going pretty well.
Really glad that you could give up some of your workday time to do this. Appreciate it very much. And Jack, thanks for coming back on, my guy. How you doing?
Doing great. Everything's coming up Bears, so I'm excited to chat. It'll be really fun to talk with everybody today.
Going to argue with that later, but in fact, we're not going to do it too much later because we're going to start with the Bears. So I did just explain for our video guys, but how this is going to go. Going to give the guys 5 minutes on their own team just to talk about how they think it's changed. We're then going to critique them as a whole. We're going to go round in reverse order from division standings last season, and then we'll talk about division expectations at the end. So, just to start before we get into that, we did have a show, myself and Ash, on Saturday night, where we did a Lions and NFL trivia quiz. If you haven't seen the show, the app is really cool. We had some really good feedback. If you're interested in that, I think we'll do one in probably another week and a half, so next weekend. And there's a $10 gift card up for grabs if you win that show, and we're doing a series through the summer. If you win the entire series, you'll get a jersey of your choice. So get involved, have a look. It's really good fun. All right, the floor is yours, Jack. Chicago have had the busiest offseason potentially in the entire NFL in terms of all the trades and, of course, having the number one overall pick. How is it going so far? How are you feeling about the team? What's the chemistry like? I mean, the upheaval was huge, apart from maybe at coach. And, give it 12 months, we'll see. But, sorry, I had to get that in first.
Well, I mean, I think it's going great. I think this is one of the most exciting times to be a Bears fan since they won the Super Bowl in '85 and showed up in the Super Bowl in '08. I think what we finally have in Chicago is organizational competency. I think we are finally at the big boy table when it comes to a team with organizational vision and building a structure that will possibly win in the long run. We're no longer putting all of our investment in players themselves in hopes that those players will be great. We are putting, it seems like under Ryan Poole's investment in the entire structural foundation of the Bears. It was torn all the way down. We're in year 3 of the rebuild. And aside from a couple of missteps, I think Ryan Poles has done a really fantastic, genius job of rebuilding this organization to the point where it's at now. The only thing left for the Bears then is to actually prove it. I mean, that's I mean, there's no denying that ultimately there's no change until there's obvious change on the field, until we see a difference in the win-loss record, until we see playoff appearances, until we see, actual championship football being played on the grass. And we haven't seen that yet. But I do believe that more than ever, the Bears have created a roster that is talented. I used to say whenever I would go on shows or call the radio stations that the Bears hadn't had a blue chip offensive player since Walter Payton. And aside from Matt Forte and a couple other guys that like perhaps could be in the conversation, there's a decent argument there to say that there was no like LaDainian Tomlinson type top level elite game changing scorers on offense. And now all of a sudden we have it. And not only on the offensive side of the ball, with the additions of Montez Sweat and the Jalen Johnson, the emergence of Stevenson, and adding Edmonds and Edwards, the Bears, I think, have all three phases acquired talent at an elite level. And so that's exciting to see. The defense, I think, had already established itself as being one of the top defenses in the league. The offense clearly has a lot of proving to do. And I think there probably will be some growing pains. But I mean, I can't wait to hear what you guys say. But wouldn't you be excited to have Caleb Williams on your football team? Wouldn't you be excited to have Roma Dunze on your football team? Keenan Allen, DJ Moore. I think DeAndre Swift has a lot of good play left in him. And I guess I would just say the biggest concerns are probably the offensive line is still in development. The defensive line, there's still some work to do. But other than that, I would venture to say that we have the best wide receiver room in the division. And that, I don't know, fellas, we might have one of the best divisions in all of football. So that might be the only problem that one of the major problems the Bears face.
What do you guys think? What do you make of what the Bears have done?
I would actually agree with all of that. I think the Bears have gotten competent in the front office, and that's the single biggest change for the entire organization. And I'm very, very happy to make fun of my neighbors to the south for plenty of past moves. But honestly, the Bears have had a couple good drafts in a row, especially process-wise, especially targeting high-value positions. They only had 4 picks this year, but a lot of that was tied up in past mistakes or in moves that paid off, one of the two. And I agree. I think the NFC North is going to be dynamite across the board this year. It kind of takes me back a little bit to like the early 90s NFC, probably Central at the time, where the Bears had like Curtis Conway and the Jim Miller, Jeff Blake combo, and Chris Carter was still around, and Herman Moore and Brett Perriman were still around for the Lions. It was a good offensive environment for all 4 teams then. It was very competitive. Everybody was 8-8 and above. And I think you're going to get that out of all 4 teams in the division this year and going forward. So I think that's astute, and I think the Bears have done a really nice job lately.
Ash, what do you think?
Yeah, I pretty much agree. Like the change, kind of like what we've seen with ours, the change in the Bears over the past 2 seasons. So we're bringing in Flus. It has been remarkable going from that sort of Mitchell Trubisky style stuff that kind of worked a bit. You obviously had that season where you won division, went to the playoffs, and it kind of fell apart. This time, you've built the right way, getting now your sort of franchise cornerstone quarterback, getting him a weapon like I don't want to toot the podcast horn too much, but we were one of the first probably on a Dunze. We were calling for him last year to be come to the draft and get drafted. Admittedly, early day for it at that point, but we loved him. So seeing him now in rival colours is probably going to hurt me and a couple of the other members of the pod quite a lot. And even last year, some of the guys drafted, I was high on Dexter, I was high on Pickens, I was high on Stevenson. I profiled them all for the podcast and loved them. And Stevenson had a great season last year. Obviously got a couple of picks against us. Pickens and Dexter get in there. Be building the right way now. And it is, you just got to do what we do. Just build on it, build on that success. And you could challenge us this year, next year. You've got the highest upside of probably any of the teams in the division now. So it's interesting to see, can you reach that and when can you reach it?
Sorry.
Just really quick. I think a lot of old Bears regimes would have gotten stuck on Justin Fields, would have fallen in love with the rushing, would have fallen in love with the fact that he is, by all accounts, a really good guy, and tried to push him and held on too long instead of making, I think, the correct and hard decision that this isn't going to work. So I think that's a great sign for them, honestly.
Yeah.
I was thinking about that. I just finished up my walk today, and you are exactly right. I think there would have been hemming and hawing and vacillating and sticking with him and indecision when I give Pulls and Eberflus a ton of credit for saying, no, we see what we're seeing. And I think I heard another podcaster today say basically that they believe, that Williams's floor is Fields' ceiling. And to be able to see that and move on and pull the trigger, like massive props for that.
I have some major concerns with Chicago, and I think the thing is, if you just said, okay, the offensive and defensive lines don't matter, Chicago could win the division, sure, but like your range of outputs could be that you could win 4 games this year because Williams just comes on slow and the lines don't operate as advertised, or you could win 12 or 13 games legitimately because just everything comes together. Nate Davis actually plays good football and stuff like that. And it just all kind of comes together. And I mean, the whole division could win 10 plus games, frankly. Maybe not the Vikings, but I'll talk about that in a minute. But kind of hoping that Ahmed Energy comes in to replace Braxton Jones, I think is the way to go. And yet I don't think that'll be this season. So we're running with Braxton Jones, who plays well for where he was drafted, but I just don't think he's a top-tier left tackle in the NFL. Jenkins is great, so he can shore things up on that side, but Shelton at centre, Davis is like, yes, we paid him a lot, so we're sticking with him, but is he going to be the player he used to be? And if he's not, then I'm kind of like, okay on Jones, but then I'm only good with 5 parts of that line. And then Ash mentioned Dexter. Well, he has some way to go, and Pickens has some way to go. And are we really going to start DeMarcus Walker, or is Austin Booker going to take that place, and how good will he be? Because if you get run on and can't protect the quarterback, no matter how good the skill positions are, Williams is going to be running for his life. Not that he hasn't been used to that in the past couple of years at USC, but the range of outcomes is so wide for me.
I think it's fair criticism, and it is a concern on my end as well. Probably the most concerning position group on the entire Bears roster. And that would be interesting because I'm not as schooled on your teams as you are, obviously, but I wonder what that process of building the offensive line for your particular individual teams looked like, because either one of 2 things is occurring in Chicago, and maybe both. One, that maybe Poles has struggled the most to build that squad, and 2, that it's the toughest squad to build. I just think, like, in terms of the amount of availability of top tier and healthy offensive linemen that are available around the league, it's pretty challenging. You got to consider that in year 1, Poles pulled 2 guys 2 weeks before training camp started, and those guys played a lot, and that's where we've come from. So, I mean, our rushing offense was amongst the best in the league last year, and now our offensive line is, by all accounts, going to be improved. I think Darnell Wright is a proven commodity, and he's available. I think higher of Braxton Jones than most folks do. I think a bird in the hand is worth 2 in the bush, and I think he is a solid left tackle. He's outperformed where he was drafted, and he is often available. When Tev Jenkins is available, he's one of the best guards in the league. That dude, well, he just pancakes grown men like for a living. And the problem is health. I believe he's in a contract year. I'm hoping that is an incentive for him to be on the field and available more often. Correct me if I'm wrong on that. I didn't have a chance to look that up before we started. Nate Davis is starting to be a real quandary. He seems like he's outside the mold of what this new Bears regime wants, which is a guy who will show up and be, gritty and play every day. I feel like I've learned that we have to give players more leeway when they are sitting out, because we often have no idea what's happening in their lives. And we learned that, for instance, with, Eddie Jackson and what was happening in his life. And most of us had no idea. I don't know what's going on with Nate Davis, and probably, for his own confidentiality, maybe we shouldn't know. But that still doesn't change the fact that when he plays, he's good, but he doesn't seem to be available. And you're right. I mean, who's going to play center? So I think we are in a, and you're also right that could be the linchpin determining factor of the Bears' season. There's no doubt about that. You just watch, like, the Packers, for instance, just dominate the Bears and other teams on the front line. And we all like to talk about the sexy positions, but there's no denying the fact that if you cannot get it done on the offensive line, And oh, by the way, if you can't roll the same 5 guys out there in OTAs and during training camp so that they can develop that nonverbal communication and that chemistry that must be had, then that's a problem too. And right now we're rotating guys, even in OTA. And you're right on the other side of the line too. Outside of Montez Sweat, Billings is the only other guy that's proven and readily available. We still have to see what those 2 second-year, draft picks will do. I do think Dexter is awfully good. And the last thing I'll say, because I'm probably taking up too much time, but the other thing that I do now know is that Ryan Poles is willing to pull the trigger when he finds elite talent and free agency. And so I don't think he's done. I would be surprised if he's done on either side of the ball. I do think on the offensive line, though, now he started to stack them deep. I mean, you still haven't talked about Jair Carter. You still got possibly a bubble player in Larry Borum. So there are guys that are still on the roster. And Chris Morgan is an excellent offensive line coach who I have a lot of faith in. So there's some good chances there. But you are still correct. In terms of just the straight up studs that you would need on day one, probably the bookends on either tackles. And other than that, maybe not so much.
All right, I'm going to move this on to the Vikings now, and I'm going to do my best job, and I'll try and be brief in trying to be as unbiased as I can about the Vikings off-season. So this is a team that obviously has let go of their star quarterback in Kirk Cousins. I mean, it seemed like every year we were saying, but is he worth it? And so to get rid of it, I would try and, if I was a Vikings fan, spin it as a positive, that you're not pouring money into that hole anymore of good but not good enough at that pay grade. And in doing that, we've traded for JJ McCarthy and also actually Sam Darnold, who looks like, with the word coming out of Vikings camp, that not only is he going to be the day one starter, but the Darnold might in fact start the entire season. Having a look at what the Vikings think about what might happen, McCarthy seems like he's a little bit behind in his development. It looks like they're reworking his footwork and his mechanics, which is actually affecting his accuracy, which was actually one of the things that he was drafted for in the first place. McCarthy is an excellent quarterback when it comes to just hitting the right spot with the ball. Wasn't given too much of an opportunity at Michigan to actually throw, but when he did, super accurate, putting it in the right places, reworking those mechanics means they're breaking him to build him back up again. So I think this is going to be Darnold's team, at least for a little while. But with what he's shown us in the last couple of seasons, especially the little bit we saw of him at San Francisco, this is a quarterback that potentially is salvageable behind a good offensive line in this division. Brian O'Neill, one of the better right tackles in this league. Christian Darrisaw, one of the best left tackles in this league. And with Reisner coming back, and let's see what we get from Bradbury and Ingram, but 3/5 of that offensive line are really good, and 2 of them, they could be above average level starters at their peak. So the offensive line is going to be good. So Darnold's in a good situation. Now got Aaron Jones in, with Justin Jefferson and Jordan Anderson. This is a great skill group. It's a good offensive line. The offense should still hum, in my opinion. Looking at the defense, yes, they've lost some players when it comes to Daniel Hunter moving on, but I'm pretending really hard. Jonathan Grenard's come in, got Andrew Van Ginkel coming into that Sam role, Blake Cashman. They recognised that their weakness was kind of linebacker and outside linebacker play, and they've invested in that. And yet Ivan Pace is still going to start, and he's going to be one of the biggest UDFA steals of recent seasons, and maybe more than that. And I mean, the DB room is starting to turn from a weakness to a strength. I mean, Lewis Cine and Andrew Booth are still there. Let's see if they are actually salvageable at all. But Shaq Griffin has come in as a depth player. Josh Metellus is there as a utility player. And then you've got Harrison Smith still, Byron Murphy, Caleb Evans. I mean, that's not going to be terrible. Maybe you can throw on them a bit. But what you do have is a team that's invested in players that will fit this defense, which is going to be cool. It's going to be hyper aggressive, lots of blitzing, and they've got linebackers that can also hang back there in coverage as well. So potentially for me, for a 7-10 team that actually dropped off at the end of the season when they couldn't make the postseason, this was a team that was actually still competitive through week 12 or 13, and they didn't have their starting quarterback last year for a lot of the season, and the quarterback play should improve. So with other things having improved, I think the Vikings can make a play for 500 or above. What do you guys think?
Are you sure? Are you sure you're not from Minnesota? I mean, you betcha. That's pretty good. You did a pretty good job. Don't worry about that. No, I think You really owned that, honestly. That was a good job. No, but I do think your points are valid. I think moving off from Kirk Cousins was the right move in terms of, I mean, man, I would like to have that guy's agent talk about just windfall contract after windfall contract. And he has performed, and he is a good quarterback, and there's no doubting he's a good dude. I mean, for some reason, interesting, like watching quarterbacks though, the Netflix series made me realize why moving off Kirk Cousins was the right move, because I think when you see guys like Russell Wilson, or you see guys like Kirk Cousins who have all kinds of talent, it seems like in some way, shape, or form, oddly enough, like there's almost like with Wilson, there's a toxic positivity. With Kirk Cousins, it just seems like there's not an ability to go for the juggler when it comes time to go for the juggler. If a guy can be maybe too nice, you think about the Tom Brady's on the field or the Michael Jordans on the field, or even how Patrick Mahomes was portrayed in that series. When it comes time to be an a-hole, those guys are a-holes. And I just think, man, Kirky, like, got the guys like you. You've got a great arm. You're great at processing. There's a lot of great things about Kirk Cousins, but so I think it's going to take him a little bit time to come back. I mean, I do think, Sam Darnold has been better than expected, and a lot of years in the league sometimes helps a guy like that who maybe got a brick in the face early on out of the gates and struggled. A lot of talent on offense. I think it was smart for them to move off of the often hurt defensive end that they let go and then draft one that's really, really good. I think that was a wise move on their part. But I think you nailed it. I have the Bears a bit above them this year. And I do think that, they have a very good coaching staff and a very good front office. That's the thing with all of this group, right? Is I think like that's the problem for the Bears, is that like everybody, you all have a head start on being organizationally great, especially the Packers. And, Detroit's been better in the last 3 to 5 years. Minnesota's had a pretty good front office for quite a while. So I feel like some of that structural foundational definition will carry them through.
So I like them as a solid last place. I think that they are at least a few wins below everybody else here. That there is with the Bears, there's at least a little uncertainty because Caleb is a rookie, but I think that he usually got like 1-1 guys of his caliber. I love Caleb Williams. I think he's going to be good right away. I think that they're probably fine, and certainly an upgrade from Fields. I think the Fields ceiling comment was on point. Darnold's not good. Like Sam Darnold's not a good quarterback. If you put him in the Shanahan system with enough good players, he can maybe be okay, which is maybe what you have here, which is fine. But he definitely puts a hard ceiling on what you can do on offense, kind of regardless. Justin Jefferson's obviously awesome. TJ Hawkinson is also quite good. And they stole Aaron Jones from us, which is a good move for the 8 games a year that he's healthy. But it does hurt you for the other half of the season when he's not. He is getting up there. He's a small guy. And while Aaron Jones is an amazing running back, running backs tend not to age well, as you all know. He is getting into his 30s, and he is a small guy for between the tackles guy. I don't like their secondary either. I will predict the downfall of Harrison Smith every year until it happens, but he is 35, and so it will come sooner rather than later. I think my biggest problem with the Vikings is, well, their front office has been good for a long time. I think they lack depth in a lot of areas, and they made a lot of trades to get up and get McCarthy and get Dallas Turner, and left themselves with not that many picks. And I think they actually would have done well to fill in some depth in the secondary, to fill in some depth at edge, and I think that they're going to have problems when the injury bug comes around in filling some key positions. So quarterback's the big thing with them, but I just think this is a transitional year for them. I think they kind of know that. And this is kind of the situation that, to some extent, with what the Bears went through with Fields. Like, they have J.J. McCarthy. They'll check him out. They'll maybe give him a year or two. And if he's not the answer, they'll move on, and they'll sort of keep transition ready while that happens.
Ash, very briefly.
Yeah, I agree. Definitely a transitional year because, at least with Cousins gave you that solid floor that maybe you can be competitive and stay relevant into December. Darnold, we've heard it all before, or at least I have. I have a friend who's a Panthers fan, and when they signed him to be their starter, he supposedly looked great in training camp, had those 3 games that PFF loved, and then he fell off a cliff. If that happens, I wouldn't be surprised. I wasn't as high on JJ McCarthy. it doesn't surprise me a bit that they're having to rework his mechanics, especially since someone else who I loved a lot more in Drake May supposedly having the same happen to him in New England. So it makes sense, especially since McCarthy didn't have that much chance to do it. And yeah, as much as they've got the best receiver in the NFL and just paid him, once you get past him and Addison, who's there, like their starting slot receiver, which is key in the McVay Shanahan scheme they run, is Brandon Powell, who Lions fans know quite a lot as someone who was a week 17 wonder all the time, would catch 5 passes for 120 yards and a touchdown from Stafford and not do much else. He was basically just a backup punt returner and backup to Golden Tate at the time. So him being your starter and perhaps in one of the most fundamental positions in your offensive scheme, bit worrying for the Vikings. And as much as I loved the Blake Cashman signing, I was high on him the most. I wanted Andrew Van Ginkel here to play the Sam role. I wanted Dallas Turner maybe in the second round to develop into that Sam role, and I've got both. While they've added pieces there, yeah, just not a lot of depth. And even some of the starting positions aren't that great. Like Jared Tillery, great pass rusher, not going against the run. Jonathan Bullard, Harrison Phillips, whatever. Try forget him kneeling on Amon-Ra St. Brown's chest, not getting flagged for it. They've got some pieces there, but it's aging. They need to rebuild that defense. And will Flores stick around to do that? Because he's a guy who wants another head coaching job pretty soon. So if he doesn't get the magic this year, could he get that magical call and go somewhere else again? And then they'll be back to square one at defense. That's the big worry for them in the long term. And obviously, will McCarthy turn out right?
Yeah, I think, Paul, just to close this discussion off and then move on to the Packers, the worrying thing for the Vikings isn't really this season. They traded their 2nd, 3rd, and 4th round picks next year. And, maybe with the Darnold at starting quarterback, they suck this year. Okay, well, they have a high draft pick in round 1 and then nothing else until day 3. So you're losing the benefit of being bad through all of day 2. So it's not a great situation for a Vikings fan, win or lose, really, because I don't see you winning the division. And if you're bad, oh no, you haven't got your picks. But there we go. Sorry.
I'd agree with that. I would just, to echo all of that, the trade up for Turner, I feel like was not a forward-thinking move. They were, even in a best case scenario, not likely to win the division this year. They were like you said, they're like competing for a wild card at best. And if the plan for McCarthy potentially not working out, like being a Packer fan teaches you one thing, and that is you need to always have quarterbacks coming in and out. You can't count on anybody being good. Like when the Packers drafted Aaron Rodgers, the year he started, they drafted Brian Braum too. Like it's good process to do that kind of thing. And so punting next year's picks does seem very penny wise, pound foolish. I know teams like a guy, but we had a ton of research this year. Like teams aren't good at focusing and picking on one specific player, and they're especially bad at realizing value trading up for non-quarterbacks. That one stuck out to me as just maybe not the best idea. It could set you back a little bit this year and next, especially if he doesn't pan out. No sure things, even at the edge. So,
all right, Paul, you are up for the Packers.
All right. Well, I think there's a lot to be optimistic about. There is still probably a touch of uncertainty around the Packers because they very much were a tale of 2 seasons last year. They were kind of medium to bad in the first half of the season, and then just turned it on to have really one of the best offenses in the league for the second half of the season. And if you just count the second half of the season, one of the best offenses of like the last decade. That is a dangerous thing to do most of the time. Often teams that finish strong make bad decisions based on finishing strong when it was just some small sample size luck. But with the Packers, I think there's some reason to think it might actually stick because, as you heard a lot in the playoffs last year, they were the youngest team to win a playoff game in something like 40 years. They had one of the best drafts that the franchise has ever had last season, basically hitting on every pick. I actually never seen a team hit on as many picks as they did in the draft 2 years ago. And as a result, their offense is pretty full. The one area where they could stand it to improve a little more than they did was probably offensive line, but they spent their first round pick on that with Jordan Morgan. It should be, if not like an elite offensive line, at least a good one. Morgan, who knows if he'll even start, but Zach Tom is one of the best right tackles in the league as long as he's healthy. I think they're going to end up kicking Elton Jenkins inside to center, which is what he played in college, but he is good at basically all positions across the entire line. And Rasheed Walker played a lot at left tackle last year. It's a little risky to trust lower drafted / undrafted guys at that position, but he played pretty well. And if he just ends up being a depth piece, that's good enough anyway. So up front, I think their ceiling is pretty high, but their floor is also pretty high. And I think that they'll be a top half offensive line, which is a good place to start. Wide receiver wise, they don't really have a true number one, but everybody's pretty good, which makes them actually pretty hard to defend. The big problem last year was Christian Watson kept getting hurt. He is probably supposed to be their number one receiver in the grand scheme of things. But
don't let his family hear you say that.
Yeah, I did that today. I shouldn't have done that. And like Romeo Dobbs is, I think, okay, not great. He overstretched as number one, but doesn't have to be. Where you really start to hit on it with the Packers is some of their down roster guys on a per play basis are some of the best receivers in football. Dontavian Wicks is the big one that I think a lot of Packer fans think will break out. Basically, on next gen stats, stats on how open he is, he's like first or second in most of the time on that. He has a very good DVOA. His per play stats are really good. Now, when you add volume, that doesn't always translate up. Sometimes you give away some efficiency when that happens. But that actually translates over a bit from college, and in particular his second to last year, before Bronco Mendenhall left that program and destroyed it. And Jaden Reed in the slot was very good as a rookie last year. He is one of the fastest slot receivers in the league. And very, very down roster, just behind Dontavian Wicks on all of those per play metrics, was Bo Melton, who was shockingly good whenever he was on the field. The guy I didn't like out of college, but his separation statistics and his per catch statistics are great. Aside from that, they seem to have hit on both tight ends they drafted last year, too. Luke Musgrave's only problem is he keeps getting hurt, which is a college problem, too. But Tucker Kraft came in and played for him, and they didn't miss a step with him. So offensively, they didn't concentrate much on the draft, but they were good offensively last year. And the only question is if the second half was a mirage, or if the average of the first and the second half is what they truly are. But everybody here is a first or second year player, with Jordan Love being a second year starter. And given how well they played last year, I think it's reasonable to assume they're at least a top 10 offense with really high ceiling. So I'm not worried about that. I think they'll at least be good, if not great. Defense is always the big question mark for the Packers. And one of the finally smart things they did here is fire Joe Barry, which all of you Lions fans, I'm sure, were making fun of us for having Joe Barry in the first place. We get that, and we were doing the same thing. He is quite possibly the worst defensive coordinator in the history of the NFL. He only had his job because he's the son-in-law of a former Lions head coach, and he has never once coordinated a top 2/3 defense in the league. He has only coordinated bottom third defenses, including the worst defense ever to play in the NFL. Defense tends to be volatile. Most teams in the league vacillate between having a top 10 and a bottom third offense. The Packers have been remarkably consistent in doing something that you can't be consistent at, and having a bottom third defense for 3 consecutive years. Even if Jeff Hafley, their new defensive coordinator, isn't a star or great, it's very likely he's a better coordinator than Joe Barry. Just dead cat bounce. That's kind of the bottom line there. Odds are he's average. And if he's average, then they should have a much improved defense, because their defense was pretty garbage last year, despite having what I think are quite a few good players. I think Jair Alexander is a pretty good cornerback. I think Rashawn Gary is a pretty good edge who was randomly taken off the field on third down against Carolina for no good reason a bunch of times. Kenny Clark is getting up there in age, but he's one of the better interior linemen in the league as well. They are not perfect on defense by any stretch, and to the Packers' biggest weaknesses are almost certainly their cornerback depth, where after Jair Alexander, they have a bunch of you hope they're goods and maybe they're goods, but no other good pedigree players there. And safety, where they haven't really had good safeties for a long time. They did go out and sign Xavier McKinney, who is an excellent signing, immediately fixing a huge hole. But both of their safeties were bad. They spent a lot of draft capital on Javon Bullard and Evan Williams. Hopefully that does the trick there. But secondary is, I think, the big potential weakness for this team, along with special teams, where they are just routinely atrocious for some reason.
What do you think, Jack?
On paper, I like the looks of Josh Jacobs and AJ Dillon. What's your thought on Jacobs though? I feel like
So
there's a lot of wear on those tires.
Um, I think that the way that they were structured last year with Aaron Jones basically taking half of the carries per game when he played, plus AJ Dillon will equal about what Josh Jacobs gives you for the most part for the season. AJ is not very good. I don't like AJ. If he doesn't make the opening day roster, I won't be that surprised. If it's Emmanuel Wilson behind him, I think he's actually a little bit better. And Marshawn Lloyd, he will play. He's a good explosive back, but he fumbles way too much. That's also a problem that could jump up and bite them, honestly. They had great fumble luck last year, and Marshawn Lloyd plus bad fumble luck regression is not a good combination. But I don't think their running game takes a huge step back as long as Jacobs can get out there and actually play. The average of Jones and Dillon is about what Jacobs is, and so I think that that's where they'll land.
It's a weird team. Just because I'm looking at it thinking, on a player-to-player basis, it's an exceptionally talented roster. But on defense, it massively underperformed for me. Like, you look at that, what you've invested in the linebacker room in terms of Walker, and now Cooper's come in. But last year, Walker was a walking liability. And linebacker play has never been a hallmark of Packers for a while anyway. You had one outlandish year a couple of years ago with a free agent, and
Yeah.
it was kind of gone away since then, but yeah.
Other than Devondre Campbell, they haven't had a PFF ranked top 10 off-ball linebacker since Desmond Bishop in 2010. So that is how long it's been since they've had a good linebacker.
Ash, any thoughts?
Yeah, so kind of stole one of my points. I was going to make fun of the whole Joe Barry thing. That was one of my favorite things, is to repeatedly punch that in. And as an FSU fan, as you can kind of see behind me, I know a lot about Hadley, and luckily, one of the best things about his Boston College team is the fact he was able to develop DBs like crazy. Elijah Jones, the most recent example, being picked by the Cardinals this year. So hopefully he can get Jar back to his best. Maybe he can get something out of Eric Stokes. Maybe he can work out which is which between Corley Ballantyne and Carrington Valentine, because I'm going to get those names confused when we're live casting the games. It's going to be horrible. And then, yeah, you've invested in the linebacker room, signing Xavier McKinney. I liked him a lot. Drafting Bullard's good. And then obviously Evan Williams. But the one I'm actually highest of all your draft picks is the one you didn't mention, in Katana Delapo from Oregon State. I loved the heck out of that guy coming into the draft, and Matt can attest to that. So I think he could honestly, I know obviously he's currently listed as like your safety 4, kind of behind McKinney in that. I won't be surprised if he's higher now by the time you play us, because he's going to hit the ground running for you guys. He's really good. Coverage, not the greatest, but run defense and all that, you're going to get a lot out of him. And then, the offense, the Packers, it's going to hinge. It's going to hinge on Love, and it's going to hinge on is Josh Jacobs just a mirage of volume, or if he has a bit of it coming down and being in a kind of new scheme, because with the Raiders, it's quite a lot of the inside zone stuff. And obviously being a disciple of McVay and Shanahan, LaFleur loves his outside zone stuff. Can he do that? But for the most part, you've got the solid foundations on offense. Can Hadley drag you a bit up for wherever the depths Joe Barry had you in? And can Jordan Love continue to be a competent quarterback?
Yeah. The Packers' MO lately in the draft has actually been attacking specific positions. I think they took 3 safeties or nickel corners, depending on how you want to define them this year, along with 2 off-ball linebackers. I think they maybe added a 3rd one in the 7th as well. And in camp, they actually do tend to be pretty agnostic in terms of whether they count draft position highly or not. Like, if you outplay everybody, there's a good chance you'll start. So, and I think they go into it with that attitude. Like, if anybody in the safety room outplays anybody else, there's not going to be a bunch of loyalty because you were a 2nd or a 3rd round pick.
All right, we have got Ryan with us, but I'm going to talk to you, Ryan, in just a second because we're running a little long on this part. So, Ash, if you can be brief on the Lions. And, I mean, we've talked about Lions ad nauseum on the show, obviously, so you can be fairly brief and then let the rest of the other guys talk Lions, and then we'll get into division expectations.
Yeah, so obviously the biggest moves of the Lions off-season are the 3 massive extensions we handed out to 3 of our best players. Obviously started with Amon-Ra and Penei Sewell on the same day, where on either side of me and Matt visited Motown Museum, but that's by the by. And obviously recently signing Jared Goff to his massive extension. tying down those guys, keeping them around for this regime when they've sort of been a major reason we've dragged from being one of the worst rosters in the league to arguably top 10 one now. Bringing in Kevin Zeitler to replace Jonah Jackson in a kind of like for like move in a way, keeping around Graham Glass and basically keeping the band back together and adding just those extra little bits to maybe push our roster from top 10 to potentially one that could beat the Viking, beat everyone, hell, Super Bowl talent. Terry
I didn't talk up the Vikings that high. I didn't.
I know. It's dumb. I meant the 49ers.
Yeah.
I meant the 49ers, but bring in Terry Arnold, bring in Rake Straw, top 2 draft picks, and then trading for Carlton Davis, arguably our top 3 draft picks this year, fixing that secondary, which was so bad last year. I'm sure the odds of you getting opposing wide receiver 1 versus Lions more than 150 yards would have earned you a damn lot of money the back half of last season. I think it was 9 straight weeks where that happened.
Wow.
Don't think that's going to be happening this year. And then just build on it, keeping Ben Johnson around. We've stayed the course, added a few more bits where we needed to, and now it's just can we keep it going? Can we keep our progression going where we've gone from having a second, third place schedule to now playing all the big boys? The schedule's got a lot harder. Can we keep it going? Now we've made it to the table. Can we keep our place there?
Paul, what do you think?
I have nothing bad to say about the Lions. So they, I think, attack things very much like the Packers do, which good self-scouting, identified their single biggest problem, and threw a ton of resources at it. Getting Carlton Davis just as a sort of a floor setter, going to help everything else kind of smooth out, and then jumping ahead of us for Terry and Arnold, very annoying. Good job, and getting Rakestraw like right after that should, even if some of that doesn't work out, just make them infinitely better than they have been in the secondary. It's been the Lions' Achilles heel for the last few years. It's cost them dearly, and it doesn't exist as a problem anymore. I'm continually impressed in how they keep Ben Johnson. I've been waiting for Ben Johnson to leave the Lions for 2 years now, and good on them for realizing there's no salary cap for coaches, and you can throw as much money at them as you need to, because you do need to. And so there's no reason to think that this team will be any worse than it was last year. The Lions didn't have a lot of regression stats go in their favor last year. This was not like the 2022 Vikings where they lucked into 13 wins. The Lions have a quality, solid foundation that they have now added and plugged holes on. This should be a very, very good team. I know we haven't done division or picks yet, but I'm definitely picking them for first, and I think that there's no reason to pick anybody else for first. But they had a really good offseason. They did everything that they should do to accurately plug any problems that they still had.
Jack?
This is just hard to talk about. So yeah, I can't disagree. I think they're set up in a great spot. I guess I don't know. I mean, I think maybe from the outside looking in, you've got Goff goggles. I don't know about that contract. I mean, he was 10th rated PFF. I understand that he adds intangibles to the team. In other words, he's well liked by not only the team itself, but also by fans. And so there's like a level there of intangibles, and that we like our quarterback and we think our quarterback is good. But I would not be surprised if we see a fall off in his play in the upcoming year. I've never been a huge Goff fan. He's just one of those guys who, he can play great. But in terms of like arm strength and what appears to be like, I don't even know, just moxie, I would not choose him as my quarterback personally. But again, this is me maybe grasping for straws a little bit, because he played very well. He played brilliantly last year. I also think it's interesting because, the Packers don't have any defensive backs because they're all on the Bears, or they were drafted by the Lions. I mean, you guys just knocked it out of the park in that regard by taking 2 of the best defensive backs really in all of the draft. And so there are very few weaknesses on the team. I would have paid St. Brown without question. I think that was the right move. He is just an incredible playmaker, has a terrific ability to get open anywhere on the field, and he's a touchdown scorer. So that's awesome. And similarly, I mean, they're the favorite for the division. There's no doubt about that in my mind's eye.
Ryan, to come to you now, and maybe you can start off thinking about division expectations as well. What do you think of what the Lions have done to round up this conversation, and then what do you expect the division to do?
So for me, yeah, we've not just doubled down, we've tripled, we've kind of quadrupled down, like I said, on defensive back because we just could not do wide receiver ones for our life. It was just kind of stemming the bleed, wasn't it, week in, week out. We give up 100 to 140 yards, tried not give up a touchdown, buckle up in the red zone, and that kind of got us through some weeks. But you can only live so long doing that. So to then go out and say, give away, say, a third rounder pick, bring Callum Davis, who's got like 75 passes defended in his career. Like I say, may not be the biggest, the strongest thing, but he's there and he makes plays on the ball. He's always kind of where he needs to be. Then go get Arnold, that everyone uses the word aura. Just has the swagger you need, like say, for a room that kind of needs a lift. And then, Rackestraw, that kind of was that fringe guy. Some people had him in the back of the end of the first round. And then, like you say, we managed to pick him up where he was. Makes a good addition, tough, physical, gritty, doesn't shy away from a tackle. So collectively addressed the unit. I still have questions about pass rush. I think right now it's my area of concern. I'll be honest, bringing in Davenport, he didn't move the needle for me. Still didn't, like you say, because he does have those health concerns. I know how good he can be, but we need to keep him on the field. And I don't know, it's weird with James Houston. It's just kind of like, I know what he can do. Will he get the opportunity to do it? Are they just going to throw him back in there? I'm not sure. I just don't know about the long term. Betts, Anthony. So, yeah, like I say, Aiden's going to cash in for a big payday this time next off season. He could have an absolute monstrous year on his own, but he can't do it on his own. Like I say, because there's some good offensive linemen in the NFC North. How I see the NFC North panning out, so I tweeted this a few weeks ago and got a lot of hate for it. I think the NFC North collectively will win the most games. I think it'll win more games in it, AFC North. Like I said, I think I have Lions, I have Packers, I have Bears, I have Vikings bottom. Like I said, Jordan Love, honestly, the kid for the next few years kind of scares me. If Christian Watson can be healthy for 70% of the year and elevate that play, and they find a way to get those two tight ends that he took kind of working in tandem, like integrating into that offense, they're going to do bits. Josh Jacobs, former Russian leader. Yeah, and the Bears, well, capital, money, what could be, like, say, a franchise quarterback. They've just got loads and loads of assets, and they've got, like, limited expectation, like I said. They don't know what they're going to do. They could be a real dark horse. And, yeah, I think this is easily the most competitive division of football. Just because, like I say, you've got 4 quarterbacks, under 28. Like I say, they're here for the long haul, collectively, all of them. So, Goff's 27, isn't it?
No,
I think Goff's 29, I think.
29.
20, you just turned 20. So, yeah.
Under 30 and it works.
Yeah, so they're all under, like you say, could be here a long time, battling out a long time. Yeah. Expectations right now, the Lions, I don't think about win totals anymore. It's win the division, and I don't care if that means 9 wins, if that means 14 wins, that doesn't bother me. I say, defend the crown, anything else. If you miss out, make a wild card. Failure in my eyes. Once you get to the top, you've got to stay at the top. You can't just be a one-hit wonder. So, yeah, defend the division, win a playoff game. I'm happy. Like I say, get back to the NFC North Championship. Great. Like I said, that will silence a lot of doubters. But, yeah, it's very hard to replicate what we did last year, and it's going to be harder. It was a miracle doing it last year. It's going to be even harder to do it again now because teams they think they'll know how to stop us. So we'll see.
I know that Paul's got a hard out in just over 10 minutes' time, and there's a couple of questions in as well. So I want to get to everyone's predictions, and then I've got just a couple of questions for you guys to finish up. And Paul, I want to talk about your article on the website as well, because I found it fascinating in just a second. So, Paul, division expectations?
I actually have the same order there. I do think the Lions will win it. I think they're, for real, an actual elite talent base. Then they did a nice job improving on it. I think the Packers will come in second, and the Bears will be a close third. I think all 3 of those teams make the playoffs, and the Vikings are the lone one out. I do think they'll be a little worse than people think. The Vikings do have a very good offensive core, but I think age on defense hits them a little bit, and just quarterback uncertainty. And then we saw that with, honestly, they were good to be 7-10 last year with how Cousins missed so much time. And I think this year, quarterback wise, in terms of their overall production, it'll look pretty similar with Darnold and McCarthy getting a cup of coffee every once in a while. Bad quarterbacks do. I'm not going to predict you to be good if you have a bad quarterback. Just not going to happen. So I'll bet they're around 5 or 6 wins and miss the playoffs.
Jack?
Well, at the risk of being boring, I've got the exact same rundown. Detroit to win the division, followed by Green Bay, the Bears, and then Minnesota. I've got the Bears with 10 wins. I've got them splitting against each of the divisional opponents, winning a game, losing a game. And when it comes to Green Bay specifically, the Bears aren't better than Green Bay until they actually beat them, and that's the bottom line. I mean, LaFleur and the Packers have the Bears number in every way, from talent to scheme to psychological warfare and social media. I mean, and so that's the big hurdle, I think. I mean, obviously Detroit is an excellent team, but we almost knocked you off one time last year. And so I just think, like, to me, what will be a real litmus test for the Bears is to have a decisive victory against the Packers and to not only beat them with the talent on the field, but also to start playing. It's an overused cliche, but to start playing chess instead of checkers, like the Green Bay Packers have been doing for a long time with the way they scheme on offense.
Ash?
Same order. Not much more I can really add. Same order, but yeah. Honestly, I think I could see the Packers and the Bears actually, well, at least 2 divisional ties this year, where in games, be it like, I think Packers and Bears might be one of it. It might be the Lions and Packers, Lions and Bears. Just a tie where we used to, as Jack said, just Lions and Bears played it pretty close last year, and that's your first place and your 4th place team in the division. Shows how difficult it is. That's why I've got this back on, because it really is going to be the black and blue division again this year. We're going to be punching each other like a 4-way boxing match, and hope the Lions win the sort of Hell in a Cell match, but it might get close at times, and that's going to scare me.
I have the same order. I actually have the same at the moment number of wins that Jack has for the top 3 as well, and I think that's good enough to get all 3 in the playoffs. I really think there's a good shout to get all 3 of us in, so we'll see what happens to that. I have a couple of questions from the chat to get to, both actually from Lisa. If anyone else has questions in as well, but I did ask them, so I need to get to them. If anyone else has questions, get them in, but limited time. Lisa, in response to the Goff comment, and you knew that was going to be a bit touchy with some of the Lions fans, but I think this question is fair. If the Lions put Goff on the trade block, how many teams do you think would be interested in him, and what would the asking price be? Because if the other move from Goff is moving on, then that is something the Lions should look at. And in a realistic world where we're not hammering your point for, he's a top 5 quarterback and, it's statistically been great. But aside from that, what do you think it's worth?
I do realize, by the way, the irony of any Bears fan criticizing any quarterback play on any other team. I fully recognize the ludicrous nature of that particular comment, but boy, that's a great question, because I mean, I think the age is a factor. And he's coming off just such a terrific year. How was the question phrased again? How many teams would be interested in him?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think with quarterback play being the way that it is, and the absolute crux of any great organization, I think there would be a lot of offers for him from a lot of those teams, especially in the lower end, like the lower 3rd tier, who would love to have a Goff on their team. Thing is I'm just not so sure if he would be quite so proficient in a startup or in a rebuild team. He clearly is greatly advantaged from scheme, his offensive line, and the incredibly elite talent that he's got surrounding him. Any quarterback would benefit from that. And he's taking advantage of it too. He's taking advantage of his opportunity. Much credit in that regard.
I think the mark would be very similar to Cousins' mark. It was this last offseason. Similar teams, similarly structured, would be very interested in him. The thing with Goff that's a little different is he is a little bit of a Jekyll and Hyde when he gets pressured. One of the reasons Detroit's just an ideal place for Goff to be is that they do have one of the NFL's best offensive lines. It's actually a great fit for him specifically. When he is well protected, he has always been one of the best quarterbacks in the league. It's just a matter of how much you can do that. So I think he would have a mixture of dumb teams who don't know what they're doing, who just see raw stats and would like any good quarterback. And then you would have a couple of good fits with burgeoning offensive lines where they would actually do some damage with him.
The other question that we had was, I think, also from Lisa, just to you, Paul, talking about linebacker play, and AJ Hawk. She was trying to talk about. I don't know. Was he ever a really good linebacker? I know he racked up some stats, but
he was very average for a very long time, and that's AJ in a nutshell. He was the king of making the tackle after 4 yards had already been gained by whoever was running the ball. And a lot of Green Bay fans like him because he has the big blonde mullet, which Packer fans tend to like. And he was a high draft pick, which carried him pedigree wise for a while. But AJ wasn't actually very good. He was okay, but he was not one of their better like off-ball linebackers that they've ever had.
So just to round this off, Paul, I just want to address this article that you wrote for Acme Packing Company a few days ago about war. And
all right.
Specifically PFF war, just because it's of interest to me, but I think people are generally interested in this concept of players being valuable and exactly what that means. And you're a baseball guy, I think, at your core, right? So you are intimately aware of what war means in baseball.
Yeah. And baseball war stands for wins above replacement. And I'm going to do the short version because I can talk about this for like an hour and a half. But war is a good sort of general metric that tells you about how good a baseball player is. It is semi-accurate. It incorporates a lot of different things, and it gives you one number as to how many wins above sort of an off-the-street baseball player gives you. And PFF and a couple other people have been trying to cram war into football for like a decade now. And it doesn't really work, mostly because the way that baseball plays happen, they're nice little they're their own, they're easily measurable, they're quantified. Football is a big mess of 22 people running into each other. So that's one big problem. But the other big problem is just there's 162 baseball games in a year. And so when you're assigning wins to people, there's 162 wins to assign to people. Football season is 17 games long. And by far the most valuable person on the field for a football game is a quarterback. Quarterback's going to just eat up a ton of value. And even PFF's war has the mean value of a quarterback being about 2 wins, that the average quarterback is worth 2 of 17 wins all by his lonesome. There's 45, 46 other players on the field splitting all the rest of that war value. And when you get to that small chunk of data, that little 100th digit chunk of value, it's just not accurate anymore. A baseball war is accurate to the integers place, not even to the tenths place. And so when you're only talking about the tenths and hundredths place for a statistic, it's almost useless. It's trumped by any value that even like a good offensive lineman creates for himself can have it entirely wiped out by like 3 holding calls or a fumble or not falling on a fumble. I'm very skeptical of that. I think that the way a lot of analytics sites go about their positional valuing is a little dishonest. It's certainly not worth very much, and it often is lying through sort of faux precision. They give you like to the 1,000th digit on the value of an offensive lineman. That's basically lying to you and saying they can actually measure that. They absolutely cannot. And so the one thing we know is quarterbacks are the most valuable. The one thing we're pretty sure of is running backs are generally speaking the least valuable, but everybody else is so close that I don't think it matters enough to put that much time and effort into figuring out.
And just to round off, Paul, where can we find you and your content?
Sure. You can find my writing at Acme Packing Company, where it's pretty consistent throughout the year. I also host the podcast Reporting is Eligible on the Frozen Tundra Frequencies Network, where you can find a lot of my co-writers there as well. And if you care about baseball at all, I also host a Brewer podcast called the Milwaukee's Tailgate Podcast.
We all know all about Reporting is Eligible in Detroit. Jack, tell us about you as well. Where can we find your stuff?
You can find me and the guys at the Bear Down Chicago podcast, along with Brendan Shagrew, who is really active in the offseason and writes some great articles as well for the Bears Wire. And then along with our host, Ryan Dangle, and Patrick Sheldon, and Cam Ellis, formerly of ESPN 1000. And then now and again, we have Logan Bradley on as well. So Bear Down Chicago podcast, and I'm at Bear Down Jack.
Fantastic. Great discussion with you guys. Paul, especially for the first time, thank you so much for coming on. Jack, great to see you again. have a great rest of your off season, and maybe we'll talk in the future very soon.
Sounds good.
Thank you,
Thanks for having
guys.
me.
Cheers,
Thanks
guys.
for having us on.
All right. Thank you to Dan Past for subscribing at Tier 1 for your 27th month. Appreciate you very much. Says, glad I'm not working today so I can watch this. Cheers, guys! Exclamation mark. Grandizer did get in a question, but unfortunately, Grandizer, we were out of time as we were signing off with people there. But he asked, which one 2024 rookie on each content creator's respective team has surprised you thus far in OTAs? Well, we can answer this for the Lions. Which rookie so far has outperformed expectations, do you think, in minicamp and OTAs? I mean, it's kind of hard to judge without pads on, I think, at this point.
Maybe this comes from me not being as high on him entering the draft process, but it's Arnold. He was down the list for me. I preferred some cornerbacks over him. So for him to sort of seize the opportunity and be as good as he's been, that's what surprised me. Maybe Varkey, but I knew sort of coming in, this would probably be what he was, be a good catcher of the ball and that. So it's not really surprised me. But Arnold sort of being this good already has.
Arnold, I've seen a lot of talk about Winger. Like I say, how about they're going to try him at loads of different positions, which could possibly hurt some other guys because I think he's got a lot of versatility and could be a guy that moves all around the line, not just play interior. So it could be like someone that's lined up to potentially take some big snaps later on in the year once he eases himself in.
I mean, I'm glad that we've got 3 different people then, because I was going to go for Vaki. That was the first person I thought of. I mean, his ability as a receiver has really been kind of confirmed at this point out of the backfield, and apparently he's pretty good in pass protection as well, and as a runner. I mean, so have you noticed in press conferences that they are basically not allowed to talk about specific things, but a lot about him? Like, they're not allowed to talk about Vaki, which I think means that they're giving him some really interesting stuff.
Mm-hmm. I've got you know me, I've got some ideas of what they're doing with him.
Yeah, we shall see. Sorry, Grandizer, that we can't get to the rest of them. We are going to hit up the rest of our show and our normal show, so I'm just going to proceed with that now. Mike O'Hara, the DetroitLions.com columnist and Hall of Fame sports writer, who has covered over 500 Lions games and a Vietnam vet, retired today at the time of speaking. So Monday he has retired. Wish him all the best in his retirement. I think he's still doing a podcast. Jeff Risdon mentioned it on the most recent Detroit Lions podcast update. So I can't remember what it's called, but listen to that. You'll find out where he is. Obviously a great guy. Wish him all the best in his retirement. Lions first day of the final week of OTAs. So that's June 10th. That is today, Monday. That has been forfeited because the Lions violated player work rules pertaining to on-field physical contact pursuant to the collective bargaining agreement, i.e. when they didn't have any pads on, they were too physical, and that was noticed. Oh well. And today, the Lions have signed linebacker/special teamer Ben Neiman, came out of college from Iowa, did you say, Ryan?
Yeah, and he's played for Denver, the Cardinals, and those are the two he's actually taken like proper snaps for. I think he was on the off season for somewhere else last year. I can't remember where.
No corresponding moves so far. Dan said in a press conference he thought we were 89 players, but I think that might have been a mistake. Do we have to cut someone now to make room?
I don't know. I just know that it's one of them where I can probably go through and count, but I just know that currently there hasn't been a tweet, we've signed Ben Neiman, waived, I don't know, Lawrence Strickland or Chelling Barnes, something like that.
Yeah. Ken Stauder just said, have you heard any reports about Mahogany yet? I think the reason why he fell in the draft is the reason why he's not practicing at the moment, which is just basically he has some sort of endemic injury. I think the doctor on DLP talks about what problems he might have and the fact that he might not have a second contract with the endemic nature of his potential injury, and that's why he might... Oh, he was only a 6th round pick, but there we go. Any thoughts on those pieces of news before we move on? About the Lions being aggressive in practice, potentially?
It's a day of OTAs. Like, no one's going to bat an eyelid.
No, day of rookie OTAs as well. Like, the vets aren't even there.
Exactly. And it's not even funny. Every year, there's probably one team that forfeits a day. Like, I remember a couple of years ago, the Bears forfeited a day a couple of years ago, and they're piping up like short memories, like bloody hell. But yeah, I don't care. How hard can you really go about pads on? Like, you should be going as hard as you can because you're going to probably do the least damage to each other, for God's sake.
If anything, I actually think, because supposedly it's, from what I've read around it, it's because Ragnar was pictured with pads that then the NFL investigated. I think it's actually, we had pads on too early and we're doing some stuff like that before we're supposed to. But yeah, who knows? Then with Neiman, of course, it's a special team, and I'm going to like it. He's fighting for that Anthony Pittman role, sort of Mike Backer, free, plays 400 special team snaps for us. At least he's a vet because he's probably fighting with Steel Chambers, who I know Rye likes. So I've just recently cut up our podcast discussing UDFAs. He's probably fighting for it's them two for that sort of last linebacker roster spot right now.
All right, let's hit the analysis from the writers talking about mini camps. So no one wrote about day one, which is a shame. I've got Pride of Detroit on day 2 and 3, and then some overall stuff from Lions Wire and the Detroit. No, just Lions Wire. I had the news linked, but there wasn't anything I don't think interesting there. Or it was brief and general as opposed to specific, I should say. So day 2, heavily focused on situational play and end of game drills. Goff seemed to struggle. Hooker was up and down, some touchdowns, some good accuracy, but another pick 6 to Khalil Dorsey in back-to-back days, I think it was. Seems to be holding the ball too long, thinking about things too much, and then making bad decisions in late game situations, even if it's, situational, but that is what it is. Staying in bounds himself, holding the ball, or checking down in the middle of the field with no timeouts. J-Mo made a series of catches, including an amazing catch in tight coverage against Carson Davis. The Lions put that up on social media. Never seen that from J-Mo before. Maurice Alexander has some obvious chemistry with Hooker, and that's continued. Caden Davis is making a play for at least the practice squad at the moment. He's the UDFA wide receiver. He's continues to make some big plays with the second and third teams. Levi has had a sack and a pressure. Dan mentioned him. We'll come on to press conferences in a minute. Terrion Arnold had a PBU against Amon-Ra St. Brown and seemed to lock him up all day, pretty much, by the sounds of it, which is really impressive. I mean, Robertson had a rep where he lined up in the wrong place, and I read that thinking, oh, God, we haven't got another cornerback who's going to do that, have we? But then he made a PBU on the rep after lining up on the right place. And then in the kicking game, Badgley made 4 of 6. Turner made all 6 of 6. I'm going to have a namesake make the team. It's going to be great. Day 3, last day for the vets, because as we mentioned, the last week of OTAs is for young players. It was a kind of fun day for half the day where they kind of flipped positions. So they had skill position players pass the ball downfield. They had Maurice Norris, Terrion Arnold, and Dan Skipper making punt catches, including Skipper being a former baseball player, making an amazing grab, apparently. Goff had lots of incompletions, apparently. J-Mo, again, was up and down with some great catches and some bad drops. PBUs racked up for Robertson, Arnold, and Brandon Joseph, who apparently has really come on. And then, so that was all from Pride of Detroit. That isn't everything that Jeremy said, so go and check out what he said as well. And then on Lions Wire, we've got Jeff, who has some general thoughts. He said that he thinks that Terrion Arnold looks, quote, ready. And he said he's seizing starter reps with the play. It's not just being given to him. Reminds him of second-year Slay. Jack Campbell's coming along, not getting caught flat-footed anymore, seeming more confident, and kind of it's slowing down for him. Wide receiver battle is strong, especially in the depth positions. DPJ is topping the list, but Green and Fountain have done really well. Williams is in with a shout. Davis, Alexander, and Smith have also had good off-seasons so far, so that's really encouraging. Hogan Hatton has outperformed Scott Daly in long snapping. Smug face. And apparently the team just has an overall focused energy. They can turn it off and on when they need to, and they know how to have fun. So that was all of the analysis throughout minicamp. What do you guys kind of make of all of those words? Because we're going to come on to press conferences in a minute, and obviously Dan talks about some of this stuff as well, but it's, I would say, encouraging news mostly.
I don't see anything that's not encouraging. I remember this time last year, I now remember hearing Goff throwing a lot of interceptions. He kind of does that, and like you say, he's not always laser focused. And like you say, he's out there, but yeah, he does make loads of casual mistakes, especially like practice. Hooker, it's one of those things where the fast release and things like that, the things that he was so used to doing with the Vols, getting the ball out of his hands instantaneously since the injury, he's gone into a shell. And only he can get himself out of it, like say, throwing the ball away, not holding it, like say, not making those decisions that are poor, are going to take negative plays, run interceptions. So for him, it's kind of like starting from scratch. And when we threw the pick at him anyway, it was going to be always going to be a wild card. Like I say, it was one of those like he slid, so let's throw a flare at him and see what can happen. I said, will he ever play a game in the NFL? Who knows? I said, if 6 games into the season, Goff, like say, goes into concussion protocol, he has to play 2 games, how confident would you be that he could go 1-1? Like I say, if you ask most people right now, they'd say no, he's probably going on 2. And they'd probably just run the ball all game and just give him the easy layups. But yeah. So the QB2/QB3 right now, you'd throw Sudfeld in. Like I say, and that pains me to say it, but right now he'd put us in the best position to win a game. And that's fair enough. Like I say, Hendon, he's got things to work from. Arnold, like I say, honestly, if the season started tomorrow, I reckon he'd line up straight opposite Carlton Davis. I think there'd be no qualms about that. He has got that. He's got, like I say, the fight in him, the swagger, the chippiness. He's just bringing everything that we know he is. Like I said, there will be no gracing period. Like I say, no, like ease him in. I reckon you throw him in, like I say, and I just don't see him sinking. Like I said, I think he's a real contender for Defensive Rookie of the Year. Like I said, I think he can go in there and instantly do a job. So yeah, it's great news. Levi, he's kind of just been on, like say, like so go back like 14 months ago, a very ever slow, like slightly curved upwards trending, putting on weight but not slowing down. So he's come a long time to get here, but he finally looks like he's shaken off those issues in the past. The injuries, like I say, hopefully it's all gone. It's in the past. He can just focus. And yeah, that is great. Like I say, it's good to see the defensive line, like I said, the backers and the receiver depth. That's the biggest thing for me. Because for me, I know a lot of people are like, oh, we can Reynolds, yeah, he made mistakes. Like Josh Reynolds is a huge miss. Like I say, and someone stepping into them shoes is really big. We need someone. If it's Antoine Green, great. Doris Fountain, even better. Like he says, Gem, but yes, a DPJ, we sent capital for him. And I wasn't high on the move at the time, but he's got a big opportunity to win me over and be that wide receiver 3/4 that we know he potentially can be. So yeah, I need those guys, like say, keep fighting, keep clipping at the heels. And then when it gets top ends of preseason, like saying he doesn't know which receivers should start, it's a good problem to have. We need that headache where they're all like, I can't play them all. But if I put any of them like in the practice squad, they're going to get taken. They'll just get poached off. So best place we can be in right now.
Yeah, like the thing with Goff, and I said it last week, I think I'm not too concerned about throwing interceptions because it's basically him working out what's going to work in the season with these receivers, getting that chemistry back in terms of with the Reynolds role, working out what everyone's good at. So DPJ, Green, Fountain, and Davis are the ones who've been primarily playing that sort of role in and out, just working out what's good with them, getting that chemistry down. So yeah, it's going to be misfires because he's basically going from someone who's played with for donkey's years to now someone who is probably only thrown to 10 times kind of thing before today, like that kind of thing. So it's going to be mistakes. With Hooker, he said it as much in, I think it's presser last week, he's basically having to learn how to walk, run, and then throw again. So yeah, there's going to be misfires. And he's overthinking it. He's trying to do too much at once. He's not sort of settling into himself. And he said as much as himself. And the only way he can really do that is, just working on it himself, getting all the reps and taking it and just taking that breather. It almost sounds like he's having late Browns Baker Mayfield syndrome, where he's just sensing phantom pressure all the time because he's had a bad injury. Just needs to trust himself, trust the offensive line, trust his weapons, and then hopefully it'll all fall into place. But again, not holding my breath, it's going to happen. And yeah, with the reports on Arnold, that's why I said he's the rookie that shocks me most, because I thought it would be, at least for the first couple of weeks, Davis and Villandor starting outside. But if he's ready to go now, that's even better for us because suddenly that cornerback room does become a bit more like how PFF supposedly see us with that graphic they put out this week with having us on the graphic for best outside corner duo in the league with the Jets and that, despite how bad we were last year. And in the final one, I know I posted about him yesterday, so we get to toot our horn. Hogan Hatton sort of being more consistent on those field goal snaps is good to hear, especially with the new special teams rules. Former linebacker, he knows how to tackle people. He's going to be someone that could be a real shock to people opening the season who don't really focus on us. They're like, why is this UDFA here? And then suddenly week one, bam, he'll probably tackle God knows whoever the Rams receiver sort of return is going to be, but they're probably going to get a nasty shock week one when he snaps the ball and suddenly bows down to them and just takes them to the ground.
I'm going to crack on with press conferences. I'll just go day by day and I'll briefly say what seems important. So Dan Campbell on June 4 said Brandon Joseph really developed last year and we wish he could have gotten defensive snaps. He's then developed in the offseason too. He's a crafty, smart guy. You can see him coming along in practice. Talks about Jill in the sports science department saying she wears 1,000 hats, does the post-practice data, work in the weight room. She's a legit strength coach and sports scientist. She's a real asset to the team. But Amit, he said he's a versatile, feisty, competitive corner in both the slot and outside. Really challenges the wide receivers, get in their face, makes PBUs impressive. On Manu, the drafted tackle from Canada, he said we're breaking him down to bring him back up. He's swimming right now. We knew he would be, but we've just got to try and keep his chin up. The biggest problem with a rookie when you're doing this is trying not to break them as a human being, basically, which is a bit rough to hear, but there we go. So we don't know who our DB starters are going to be. They haven't got a clue. It's a really exciting and open competition with everyone playing really well. Betts, they said he's more versatile than even the entire team realised. Good hips for a big man, smart too, able to rush or drop into coverage. And on Antoine Green, said he also had significant growth throughout the season last year. High hopes for him in this camp. The slight injury last week set him back and they weren't able to get him out there. Meet Robertson then came to the stand, said that he was a very competitive person and he got to the NFL, in brackets, despite his height, by being that guy. He said that we're like that as a group in terms of the DB room, and that's how they're going to stack wins, just by being a competitive group who push each other. And he said in terms of position, he said whatever they need me to do, that's why I'm here. So he's not wedded to the idea of being an outside corner just to be an outside corner. Montgomery, there was a stat thrown at him which I couldn't actually make out, but it was something along the line of he's basically one of the most consistent running backs in football in the last 5 seasons or something. He said he had no idea and didn't really care. In terms of him and Gibbs as a duo, he said we're like PB and J. We're great in our own way, but actually quite different. He said we both want to be better this year. We weren't good enough last year. He said we coach each other on what we're good at because they're different things and it works really well as a tandem. That having them both have to share the load keeps them both healthy, which means they both can take additional reps because they're both on the field. On Vaki, he said he's a special, quiet, goofy, funny guy, and he's almost a cumulative of the whole room, so he can do a little bit of everything, which is really encouraging. And on Scotty Montgomery, he said he's been great. He's been holding me to a higher standard. Some coaches let vets off and go easy on them, but he's been on my tail and making me better, said Montgomery. And finally, Anzalone said playbook-wise, it has changed a bit despite the consistency in coaches. He said with the change in secondary players and the investments they've made, we can leave them a bit more on an island, leave them to it, and focus more on stuff up front rather than worrying about stuff behind them. On Jack, he said there's no drastic changes, but he's building on what he did last year, not as panicky in terms of not knowing what we're doing, and is more comfortable. And he said nothing we did last year matters. We're at square one, and every game matters going forward. That was June 4, boys. What do you make of all of that? Because there's a lot of information there, and some of it's not that useful, but some of it's really interesting, I think.
I think it's interesting that Montgomery, the fact that, like you say, he downplayed so much, like say, what him and Gibbs were last year. Whereas, like you say, technically, like you said, they were probably the best combo in football. You can make a case as better than that. Like I said, obviously they've got hold themselves to very high standards, and they think they can be even better. Like I say, and he's the fact that he's, like I say, if I was Montgomery, I sign the deal, and then I see Gibbs, part of me inside goes like, what the fuck? Like I say, you give me that and then you go do that. That's like a bit of a side swipe, but he's fully embraced that role of, like I say, where the picture where I say like Splinter has got his arms around the little turtles, and then like you say, all the big turtles have got their arms. Like I said, he's kind of like that. He's like the old Splinter in Gibbs. Like I say, so he's embraced. Going to take up to now. I think this year, like you say, it might go like 60-40. Last year was Montgomery. This year it'll go like maybe 65-40 Gibbs. I think he knows they're going to be like they're going to push Jimmy even harder, especially in a rushing game. But yeah, I've never been more excited to see what these two are going to do this year. I think Jameer Gibbs can win the rushing title this year. I think he's going to get that many opportunities. Manu, I'm not concerned. I'm not surprised. I'd say if he never plays in the NFL, that's not because he's not good enough. That's because the adjustment is just too great, or he's just struggled to get it. Like I say, if there was a scheme where the team that CFL drafted him, you could go borrow him for a year and bring him back, and the Lions still kept the rights, I'd probably plead them to do it. Go give him some pro football experience because he was taking the CFL draft. But right now, yeah, like I say, you could see him in a year, could see him in 4 years, may never see him. But who knows? But yeah, keep his head up. Like I said, I don't think he'll get down about it. I think he knows just how big the task is in front of him. And then yeah, the safety room. It's weird, isn't it? It's going to be a weird enigma this year. Like, is Branch going to play safety? Brandon Joseph, I know how good he was in college. He had a special year. Like I say, transfer did all work, slid in the draft last year. If we weren't a good football team last year, he would have played. And Dan confirmed that. I would have played him if the games didn't mean everything. Like I say, so I can see him maybe, like I say, getting some rotational snaps this year. It sounds like they are going to have him on the active roster and suited for some games, especially early in the year as well, where the games where you can afford to give him that opportunity. So yeah, it's going to be, that's probably the most interesting position for me, is how we get the likes of Iffy, Branch, Kirby, CJ, like I say, and like guys like that. So you've got 5 safeties, like I say, that can all do the job. So yeah, and Betts, I don't know. I don't know what to believe about Mathieu until I see it. I reckon in pre-season he may get a big workload, and then I'll buy into the hype. I know how good he was in the CFL, but that was Canada. Like I said, and they play the game different over there. Like I said, they don't use tight ends. So now he's going to come up against like the tight ends. He's going to have to be asked to do a lot of different things. His role's going to change. But yeah, it's good to hear that they think that they can move him around the line to find the best place to fit him.
Ash?
Yeah. Number one, don't worry, guys. I've downloaded the memes when it comes to the cut up later. I can just stick that right in on the screen for you. Great analogy there. But yeah, in terms of the Monty thing, yeah, like I think with the consistency, looking up quickly, it's probably his yards per attempt. He's not dipped below 4 yards per attempt his entire career in the NFL, which like 4 yards attempt is supposed to be like the benchmark for running backs. So the fact he hasn't got below that ever, even on a shoddy Bears team, it's really good to hear. And yeah, he must love Gibbs because, yeah, with the Bears last couple of seasons, initially he had Tariq Cohen, who I know is making a comeback in the league with a whole new special teams rules, which I hope is going to go well for him. And then he had Khalil Herbert the past couple of years, who I was very high on. Now he's got someone that's actually worthy of taking some of those snaps off him and taking some of those shots off him. And I'm more than sure he'd be happy to sort of teach Gibbs the ropes because, yeah, it could be they were getting up there ready. It could be that they're the best 1-2 punch and running back in the league. And they're going to love it because both of them can do a lot now. Like Gibbs will be able to run better, like run between the tackles better. We might use Monty more in the passing game, which we didn't really do last year. We'll be able to mix it up with them. And then add Varkian as well, who, if you can do a bit of everything, opposing defenses won't know what the fuck's going on. It's going to be fun to watch. And then I love the sort of insight Anzalone gave into the defensive playbook where with the new secondary players, they won't have to help them as much, basically, is what it's saying. So it will be less of linebackers having to drop back in coverage, which means more blitzes, more use of them. So instead of having to have Anzalone tracking I don't know, TJ Hopkinson. Maybe then, we can use Branch as a safety and have him cover him. It'd be a lot better. So that'd be quite cool to see. And I'm excited to see something from Green. I know, obviously, when we drafted him, we had obviously Chris from formerly of the Pride of Detroit podcast on at that point. He was talking him up, and we needed to work on him because yes, he had Drake May throwing him the ball, and he was their number 2 target. But he still needs to work on his route tree and the route running and that. So if he's made that growth last year, we just didn't really see it, because I know he had a few snaps at the end of the season, but most of them were run blocking and that. That's the big thing for me preseason. Everyone who listens to this podcast knows how much I've been harping on about needing an next receiver. And if he can be that, what a hell of a steal he could be with a 7th round pick.
All right, going on to June 5, Dan Campbell said that the injured vets, of which there are quite a few, are going to have to catch up in training camp, and they're quite a way behind because the guys have done really well so far this spring. So we like a fullback if it makes sense and can help us dictate to the defense, but they're not going to force it. It could be Malcolm, it could be a tight end, it could be Liam McNeil. It could be, but when the time comes, they're not going to scour rosters around the NFL for a fullback and try and force it. About Aleem, they said, we've talked about it for a while. Khalif, he said he's our Swiss Army knife. He can play F, X, Z, returner. He'll always have a place in our offense. He'll be critical for this team moving forward. He said if you're confident in your guys and signing them early does save against the cap, but you have to be absolutely sure that they are who you think they are if you're going to do that. On Pascal and on Zarike, he said they've both certainly improved, but we're not in pads, so let's see. But Levi's having a really good spring, especially because of where he's come from. Ryan, you mentioned about him putting on weight. His back is able to handle it. He's banking some really good reps. He said, I like where they're both at right now. On Fountain, he said he's really improved last year. His fundamentals, he's getting time with Goff, and he's in the mix for the 53-man roster, but he's glad he's on the 90 right now. And Wingo and Levi have been getting reps at defensive ends, and the flexibility is really good for us. Melifonwu was next up. He said that there's a big difference in him from 12 months ago, but he's feeling just like he did at the end of last year in terms of playing faster, making plays, feeling comfortable in the defense. He's said he's a very critical person of himself. He said he feels like he left some plays out there last year and he's going to improve on self-scouting. He's in the middle of his progression and there's lots more room to grow. The secondary is a great group. Love being in the meeting room, that the competition is very high, but there's no animosity about who's going to win the job. Chemistry hasn't been a challenge, despite the fact they've been chopping and changing players so much because there's so many of them, because they're very active in talking to each other and trying to push each other upwards. And there's a lot of young guys which are looking to him to be a vet, even though he's not quite a vet yet. And so he has to be on point. They're looking to me, but equally they're also looking to players like Alex, and he's looking to Alex as well as other vets in the room. So he's kind of in that awkward position where he's both a rookie and a vet all in one. Derek Barnes talks about the fight that was meant to have happened that day. He said it was a friendly fight, that they're out there competing, getting better, but it's all love and there's no hate there whatsoever. That it's been a long road for him, learning from year 1 to year 4. Football IQ, he's learned a lot. Knowing where everyone's meant to be, that the scheme kind of continuing as to how it has been the last few years really helps him. He kind of just understands what's going on instinctively and he can just focus on the task at hand. They're a hungry team. They've got a real chip on the shoulder now, feeling like they should have been to the Super Bowl, and they have to work even harder now to go back and get it with the change in schedule being a number 1 team. He said that we can goof around before the play, but when we're out there, it's all work. People are trying to win jobs. They're not about to lose it by not concentrating. And lots of man coverage and lots of me rushing this year, which we have all been calling for. So that's really lovely to hear. Jared Goff finally up on this day. Said that the intensity has been dialed back a bit. They're just improving on things, but there are competitive moments. They just focus on improving themselves individually as a unit, and then they go out there and play the opposition unit, and they kind of get punched in the mouth, go back to square one and start again and build and whatever. So it's an interesting process. He said Dan Campbell has been honest with us about what it takes. They're not turning up week 1 expecting to be great, that they've got to earn it even more now than they did before. He said, if a rookie wants to watch a vet for an example of how to conduct themselves as a pro, it's Khalif Raymond. And on Sam Laporte, he said he's always pushing himself, asking lots of questions of coaches, of vets, and being hard on himself to try and improve his technique. That's June 5. Any thoughts on any of the comments in there? Because again, I think there's a lot of gumph and a lot of filler. And then every now and again, there's just a nugget that's like really tasty.
Well, the biggest tastiest nugget was obviously the Barnes one. We said at the end, lots more man coverage. That's a big yes for me. Him rushing a lot more. Finally, this is a guy I know we keep harping on about it. Wasn't edge rushing to this yesterday at Purdue, moves to inside linebacker, has been there for the most part now in the league. When we had the crisis last year at Sam, he should have been the first name up because he's done it before. So it's good to hear we're finally going to be using him a lot more in that kind of role, or even just blitzing him because, yes, I know there was the whole thing with Dak Prescott last year where he forgot to use his arms. But for the most part, he's a great blitzer. Let's use him that way because I know Alex Anzalone was one of the best blitzing linebackers the first couple of weeks last season, but he's better at coverage. So if you're going to blitz one of them, blitz Barnes, blitz Campbell. Don't use AA in that role. And also I love Iffy's press conference as well, because again, I know I'm not the biggest Iffy fan on the podcast. That goes to Matt. There's a reason why I'm wearing Kirby's jersey. But it's sort of him growing into the role. This will hopefully be this is his first proper full off season without having to deal with injury as well. So now he can build on that great end of last year he had, have a proper off season, work on the coverage stuff, which is his big weakness. But it's great to hear that. And then obviously hearing that Fountain's put himself in his mix. This was a guy we picked up last year at the end of the preseason from the Bears. We had a really damn good preseason. And he is your prototypical X-build. So yeah, him having to work on his fundamentals, and he's been getting it, working on that route running, working on the ball, tracking the ball in the air. That's what you want for your X. He is the answer to we're in a 4th and 5 in the red zone and we need a touchdown, 5 seconds left on the clock. We need someone to run a fade. He could be that for us. And if you just use him in that role initially, then yes, build him up and have him be the long-term answer to Josh Reynolds. I know obviously we're in 5-10 minutes I'm talking about Tom Green, but if it's Therese Fountain, again, steal, and it will just bring us that element to the offense that we kind of need. We've got every other kind of receiver in the room, kind of with Leaf and Amon-Ra and Sam and Gibbs and that, just needing that big outside presence that just complete the wide receiver room again for me.
I think it's interesting that we've now no traditional fullback. Dan saying we're not scouring the rosters, we're not going to bring in a fullback. We're going to try people there. And I don't know, as of right now, if I was pushed, I'd say Malcolm's very much on the bubble, not making the team. If he can't play fullback, he'd be one of the kind of guys I wouldn't be surprised if he didn't make 53. And I know one of those that a lot of people would probably like jump on very quickly and be upset about. But it is what it is right now. But yeah, I don't know. A leading fullback sounds fun. Will they ever do it? I don't know. I've got a feeling they will do it, but like I said, they do like the thought of talking about Panel has grown about. But yeah, it's very interesting to hear about. And yeah, like I say, you hear about the so-called fights, but we know for a fact he won't a fight. Like you said, Dan, as macho as Dan is, he wouldn't tolerate anything like say any like insubordination, like say 2 guys losing their temper with each other. That's fine. They're all out there heated. And like I say, there's only a few penciled in starters, like I say, right now on the team. There's probably 3/4 of the positions where the jobs are up for grabs. So tensions will be running very high, especially in, like they say, the secondary. Like I say, and when they're, like say, arguing with receivers, I can see it getting pretty chippy out there. But I trust them to keep their heads. Not like other teams where you see practice getting cancelled because you've got sideline brawls. That just would never happen here. I just don't think anyone ever allow it here. For me, scraps and fights are good. I like that mentality.
Right, final day. Just 2 people here, Dan Campbell and Elite McNeil. So Dan said it's been a really good spring and I'm proud of these guys, but I didn't expect anything less. The message to the team, what do you want out of the season? Let's start at the end and work backwards from there. I want the whole enchilada. On DJ Reader, he said he'll be a camp decision on whether to start practicing with him by training camp, but we knew that when we signed him and almost everyone else should be ready by that time. Marcus actually had a question on that. Is there a chance Reader won't be ready for the start of the season? We'll back to that afterwards. Ali McNeil, He said, we definitely see the evolution for him and see more for him, the nimbleness, the power of athleticism he has, but there's more in there. Some of it is just fundamentals and technique, and our new defensive line coach is going to unlock that. Mitchell Agude, he said he's another that we're really pleased with last year in the practice squad, really developed the rush end and helped in special teams. And the coaches repeatedly talked about him that he just gets taught once and he learns and he doesn't make the same mistake twice. He's a worker and he learns fast. For the vets, the message for them is just to come back to camp physically, exactly where they are right now and not to lose that focus. In terms of growth, he said, we can't just do the Ron Burgundy and read off the teleprompter. There have to be improvements in the nuance of play and realising that on this play, yes, the book says this is your responsibility, but if you see there aren't any threats coming to you, that you go and help other players. So not just being good by the book, but being smart too. On Donovan Peoples-Jones, the wide receivers are going to shake things out when you get to camp, but he's got to play big boy ball and battle out there in contested situations. If we didn't like him, he wouldn't be here. On Khalil Dorsey, he was carried off on a cart on the previous day. He said it's just a little ankle issue. He'll be fine. And on the San Francisco loss, he said it motivates you, but the guys aren't deflated. We've talked about it, but not at length. That was it for Dan. Aleem, he says, I'll be in Michigan next week working out. Even along with the rookies, he'll be in the weight room. It's just his routine now. Nothing to do with him wanting to stay for OTAs. It's just what he does. It's where he lives. About fullback, he said it's just Dan Campbell being Dan Campbell. He said, I'm confused about it, but I hope it's real. I got it 100%. He said, I hate practicing without pads. Can't wait to actually get started. Play physical with the pads on. He said, for me, there's supposed to be a leap every year, and I expect more from myself. The goal is to go undefeated this season. He said, the aim and the goal per Dan Campbell earlier, in terms of, they asked him the same question. He said, perfect season, Super Bowl win, celebrate in Detroit, which I think we can all agree is the aim. He said, about the working out habits, no habits there, but also in terms of the weight, is just him being healthy consistently. He's not going to let it go because there's nothing to let go. He is just who he is, and that is his weight at that level of his life. On DJ Reader, who obviously hasn't practiced yet, he said he's also been chatting with him about different moves that Aleem can do, technique stuff, suggestions. He's been huge as a mentor on the sidelines, so it's not just been, why can't I remember?
Michael Brockhouse?
No. The rookie last year who isn't going to play very much. Defensive tackle, DJ Reed's been helping. Broderick Martin, thank you. So not just Broderick Martin that he's been helping, but he's actually been coaching Aleem as well. On his contract, he said he told his agent, do not talk to me about this stuff. That's your job. I'm just focused on the work. That's what I get paid to do. And he said about the team, we have the passion to be elite and we're really close. So I like the bullishness there. We've got a couple of questions to get to as well at the end of it. But what do you guys think, especially with Marcus's question about DJ Reader and whether he's going to be ready to go?
It doesn't worry me. I'm not concerned. Veterans, when you're a vet like him, you know your body. You know how to look after it. He'll be able to tell you now when he'll be ready to play. And the team will know that. He'll have told the team when he signed, I'm not ready for another 75 days. Or he said, I can't go to week 3 at the earliest. And he'll have said, fine. We got Aleem, baby. Like, it's fine. Like I say, it's no worry. Like I say, so yeah, he'll be fine when he's fine. So yeah, I'm not worried about him. Like I say, long-term deal. Aleem, like I say, I know everyone wants to know about the contract. Like I say, a lot of people think he could price himself out of move. We're looking at the first serious player in a long time to get tagged. He has another good year, he could get the tag because they just can't watch him leave. But they want to negotiate down for him, and he'd be fine with it. So yeah, no talks contract. They say he could go out there and have an 11.5 sack year, and he's like every team in the league wants him. You don't let him go. But yeah, that's a problem. Ask me again in week 13. Like I say, is he going to get paid? Like I say, are they going to start talking then? Doesn't bother me. But yeah, it's all good. Like I say, I'm glad to hear that Dorsey's okay because you get those like not hyperbole on purpose, but you get the he's gone down, he's been stretched off, and you immediately think, oh God, season's over. Huge loss on special teams. that hurts. You need to fill someone in. So it's glad to hear it's okay. But yeah, no, I very happy, like you say, and a lot of these guys, like you say, DPJ, raised eyebrows for some people when he brought him in. But yeah, like I say, they've got a lot of faith in him. Like I say, and they think he can fill a hole on this roster. Like I say, it's just putting him in the right positions to do it. So yeah, they certainly seem very confident by his. And yeah, are we going to go undefeated? No. But do you say you're going to go undefeated and win it all? Damn right you do. Like you say. Like I said, the goal is you get back to the NFC Championship game and you hope the 49ers are there because you want to avenge it. Like I say, that will be the be all and end all and measuring stick of the season. So yeah, but no, everything I wanted to hear.
Exactly. You got to go off that last point. You've got to manifest it. If you go into the season saying, I think we can win 10 games, you're probably going to play like that. You're not going to give it all the time. And that's not a leave, and that's not this team. So yeah, of course they're going to say, we want to make it to the big boy party and win it and have the celebration in Detroit. And if that happens, God help my bank account. But yeah, there's a reason I didn't mention the Lee McNeil stuff earlier, and that's because I've been mentioning it since we drafted him. Give me that play. I've been calling for it for 4 years now. Do it. But yeah, and obviously I won't go too much into Good Eggs. I know we're going to have a question about it later, but that's another guy who has reared his head in the Sam conversation, used to play for the Bucks. And yeah, it's not just, I think, not just Dan saying it, I think he's turned up in a couple of the practice reports as someone who is really impressing. And obviously being good at special teams definitely helps you at this point because, yeah, you might only get maximum 10 snaps a game on defense with the way we use the Sam role. So if you can do other stuff like special teams, that'll definitely help you sort of stick in a roster spot. So again, just nice to hear. And obviously, yeah, good to hear that Dorsey didn't get injured because while special teams rules might be changing a bit, so he might be a bit less valuable there. This is someone who was a starting cornerback for us for a couple of weeks at the end of last season, and he didn't look too bad for most of it. He did have some bad plays, but that's to be expected when you're basically being thrust into a starting role when 2 weeks ago you were a gunner and returner. So having someone, again, who has that sort of starting experience, has had snaps now on defense and hasn't looked the worst, just keeps that secondary nice and deep, which we need because as we saw last season and we've seen every other season before that across the NFL, secondary gets hurt a lot because of the way it's been played. So you need as much depth there as possible. So him not having the ACL tear and all that everyone instantly was worried about as soon as the news comes out, him not having that just being a bit of an ankle issue. Sigh of relief.
Yeah. Right, a few questions to get to. Can't order first up. So Mitch Agude, his name has been mentioned a bit. If Matthew Betts maintains his upward progress as well, I can see a scenario where a certain constantly injured / unavailable Sam linebacker doesn't make the 53. Do you think James Houston is potentially in trouble at this point? Because we haven't heard a lot about him at camp. He doesn't seem to be available very much. His best play was 2 seasons ago now. So this is now a contract year for him, if I remember rightly.
Yes.
Is there a chance he doesn't make it at all?
There was a chance last season he didn't make it at all. I remember this time last year, him being on bubble watch for a certain website and people being uproar on it. But I could see it then because I was saying it this time last year, to play that Sam role, you can't just be a good pass rusher. It's very well and good. He has that elite trait. Great. That's why last year we were working on building up the coverage, building up the run defense so we could get more snaps. And he just didn't show it in camp. Didn't show it in the games because, yes, unfortunately, there's that play that keeps flashing in my mind every single time it's brought up of him having to cover Noah Fant on a sort of real route and it just not working. And then he got injured. Houston right now is really fighting for his life on this roster. The good news for him maybe is if he doesn't make it here, someone will look at that play 2 years ago and think, we can recover that. We can just use him in a deep designated pass rusher role and try it ourselves. And hopefully it works out for him so long as it's not a direct rival in terms of an NFC contender or and someone in the NFC North taking that chance. Good luck to him, because he definitely deserves it. Like that rookie season where he played for half a season and looked great, and his whole story of playing in Florida and not doing so well there, going to Jackson State and being told, oh, you're not a linebacker, you're a pass rusher. Him to have the sort of his day in the sun properly would be nice to see, but at the same time, it's becoming more unlikely that it's going to happen in Honolulu blue and silver, unfortunately.
Yeah, it's a shame. He's already defied the odds of what most 7th-round picks ever do in the NFL. So he's already done more than I ever expected him. If the door closes here, it will probably open for half the league. Like you say, the NFL, like you say, there are still long memories out there. He'll get lots of chances. Look at guys like you say, Shane Ray, guys like that, that kept getting chances. Like you say, guys like who's that defensive line, like say the edge that the Falcons drafted and kept getting chances every year, every time they cut him. I can't remember his name, like it'll come to me.
I mean, there's going to be openings. I mean, we were just talking about the Bears and who they're starting at edge. Like, he'll have a chance. I wouldn't be surprised to see him stay in division.
I could say him to stay in the division local, yeah, and that's probably the worst nightmare. Because like I say, you can see him just having just one game.
Yeah, where he tears you up.
That game plan and gets like a 1.5 sacks, and you just think, well, that backfires. But like you say, I can see a chance where he's not here. But yeah, he won't have to worry about being picked up.
Ash, did you find out who that was?
It's not Vic Beasley, it's the other one, isn't it? The one
Vic Beasley, he counts on that, yeah.
It was because it was the one that was signed for the Bears.
Like those guys that kind of just bounce around every single year. Like I said, sometimes you bottom out, but they always get chances. Like I said, you could have another 5 years where he's on 4 different teams.
We're not talking about DeMarcus Walker, are we?
No, it's the other one that signed for the Bears that we were laughing at when they signed him. Oh.
That's currently on the team?
No.
Okay, don't worry. I'm going to ask the follow-up question from Smoking Jeremy B of Kneecap Biting with the Motor City Lions. So after hearing every beat writer saying that Betts has the most elite bend and skills that they've seen on the roster, what odds do you think he cracks the starting role opposite Hutchinson? I haven't said too much in this section, apart from just the press conference-y recap. So I'm just going to say, I don't think there's any chance Betts starts the game this year. I think it's going to be part of the rotation, but the Lions, not unlike Penn State, like to give the honour to some of their veteran guys and players that have been on the team. So if it's Pascal, I wouldn't be surprised. But if Pascal and Davenport and Betts all play a similar number of snaps, I wouldn't be surprised. I don't think Betts is going to be given the honorary start.
No, I don't see it. I see him play. Like you say, look at Imish and his time here. How many games has he actually started? You can probably count it on, like, say, 1 hand, 1.5 hands. John, he's not a starter, is he? But he knows when he's ready to go into the game. Like, there's a game plan. Like I say, X amount of time in or downs, we throw you in. I reckon it's going to be like that. Like you say, Betts will play lots of snaps if he produces and stays well. He'll probably never start because I think, like I say, when teams are easing in against the run, that's probably when you maybe don't want him. But once the game kind of progresses and, like you say, coming in second half, like you say, maybe they're a bit more comfortable to air it out. Quarterback's holding on to it a little bit, like, say, 0.3 seconds longer. Then you get Betts in. So, like I said, they've kind of got a little bit too comfortable. And then let Betts go, like, try to interrupt that. So, yeah, he's more a finisher maybe than a starter. I see him right now.
Yeah, not to get too deep into the whole scheme stuff. Betts is not the right kind of body type and pass rusher to be starting opposite Hutch. Hutch is best in the rush end role. So on the opposite side, you want someone who's good at the big D role. So it's your Pascal, your Kamish, your dare I say, Levi and Wingo at this point. They're probably throwing their names into the hat with how they've been talked about. You want that big sort of starter, and then it's on those third downs. Then maybe then you slide Hutch to the big end role, and you bring on your Davenport, your Sam linebacker, rush backer kind of thing. So as a starter, no, Betts is not going to do that. But as a third down, kind of, this is the guy you go to. He might be able to do that. But yeah, you need to work on the run defense because if he doesn't work on that, teams will spot it and be like, well, we can run the ball that way, and then they'll get 10 yards in a 3rd and 5 by running right at Betts, and that's not what we want at this point.
Quick one. Marcus asks, Caleb Williams over under 4,000 yards passing.
Just under for the memes.
About 3,600. I don't think he sets the record for 30 passing touchdowns this year, but I reckon he'll get close.
I'm going to go lower than all of you. I think 3,200. Like, just solid, and comes on late in the season.
24 touchdowns, 11 interceptions.
I think that's low on the interceptions too. Like, he can put the ball at risk. Like, that is one of the things he was slated for at college, right? Was making the odd boneheaded decision sometimes, trying to play hero ball and throwing into double coverage and stuff. I can see him being like a 25-18 sort of guy.
I have him down as a 2020 quarterback.
Fair. Brent said Laporta lined up a lot in the slot last season. How much do you think Jahmyr Gibbs lines up in the slot? Last year, he lined up in the slot 52 times out of his 681 offensive snaps. So about 9% of the time. You think Gibbs can take a step? Because they've talked about Gibbs and his route running and not just being the dump-off guy, but someone who actually runs routes. And if you can run them from running back in shotgun, can he flex out a bit more to the slot?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did it in Bama, didn't he?
16-17%. I'd say they probably double that count out in the slot.
Means he can get him and Monty out there as well, potentially.
Exactly, that's what I'm thinking. This, again, you could have those plays where you line them both up, and then you flex. You sort of have Gibbs motion into the slot before the snap, and the team's been talking about it because obviously the aggregation accounts took hold of that and was like, oh yeah, the Lions want Gibbs to become a better receiver from the slot. It's like, no, they just want him to play more there. And we've got to bear in mind, this is a guy that when we drafted him, not only was Alabama's leading rusher the past season, he was also their leading receiver. So he's got the chops for it. We just didn't see it last year because he's probably setting into the league and how different that is from playing in college. Yes, I know it's the SEC, so it's not as big as the transition and say coming from a D3 school, but it's still a step up. So hopefully this year, because the rushing light sort of clicked on for him, now it's sort of time for the receiving to catch up.
Final question. Mike the Marine is in the chat and says, last year, and I'm going to trust all of you guys that all of your stats are right, even where you don't have the same numbers. So I'm just going to give these random stats and then come with a question. Last year, the Lions had 16 interceptions and 41 sacks. That's been qualified by people saying in the regular season. Brent has said 20 interceptions and 51 sacks, including the playoffs. Jeremy B has said 54 sacks with the playoffs included. I don't really care, but the point of the question is, what do you expect from this season in terms of those statistics? Do you expect the interceptions to go up? Do you expect sacks to go up? What do you think the defensive production is going to look like this year? I will lead off, perhaps, by just saying, if we don't see an uptick in those stats with the investment that we've made this year in the defense, then I think there's a massive missed opportunity. With DJ Reader coming in, you have to double DJ Reader and Aleem McNeil and Aiden Hutchinson. And when I looked last, that would create one free rusher, and that's one too many offensive linemen. So you have to leave at least two of them in single. So you can't leave Reader in single. You maybe can get away with leaving Aleem there, but what if it happens if he takes a step? You can't leave Hutch in single. So they're in big trouble in terms of pass rush. We don't have the rusher on the other side. They'll have to run towards the other guy into the big end. But sacks should go up. And if we're not covering better and giving our rushers more time to get to the ball because of the investments we made in the cornerback room, I don't know what we're doing. And if that investment in Reader is going to create more pressure on the quarterback, with better cornerback play, we should get more ball production. So they feed off each other, and we've made investments in both. If we don't get more than that, we've done very bad.
I can see less sacks, but a lot more interceptions. I think the quarterbacks will, like I say, panic, and they'll get rid of it a lot quicker. I think pass breakups will be the biggest increase we have this year. I reckon, like I say, forced incompletions. I think they'll skyrocket.
I think both will go up. I'm going to put numbers on it. 20, at least 20 interceptions. So it doesn't sound a lot for only 4 more, but you think about, and I hate to rag on the guy, but how close Kindle Vildor got to some balls last season. If you have someone better like Arnold or Rachel there, they're more likely to get the ball. So at least there's going to be up to that. And in sacks, with Reader coming in, with Aleem hopefully taking the step, with us bringing in Davenport, another season from Josh Pascal, where he's not an off season where he's not having to be injured. 55 sacks, because we forget we had the most pressures in the regular season last season. So naturally, the regression of pressures to sacks is going to go up because our percentage, I think, was like bottom 3 in the NFL. That's going to regress to the mean, which means more pressures will turn to sacks, which means more sacks. So at least 20 interceptions, at least 55 sacks.
All right, that's all of our questions. So that's going to be all she wrote, and I'm going to sign off now. We've answered a lot of questions, so I'm going to sign off the video show at the same time. Next show on the main podcast is to be confirmed at the moment. We did have some more roundtables planned, but to be honest, I found it difficult to get some of the guys together on our own division, so I might shelve that idea and we're going to come up with some new plans. It might just be that we talk the end of OTAs next week, but let's see. There will be another quiz coming. I've got to finish off the one currently in progress for next weekend at some point, and I'll try and make more. Some people ask for it weekly. I'm going to try and aim for that potentially after next weekend. I've got to give myself a bit of time to make them. Talked about it earlier on. If you've just come into the video show or a bit later than when I talked about it, we did a trivia quiz. The replay of it is live on YouTube. Check it out. See whether you like it, and then come and join us next time. Free to enter, although we do ask if you can make a super chat or donation for it, since it did cost us money for the software for it and whatever. The software is great to make it work, and you'll see that in play. I'm making the quizzes so the Roar of the Lions guys can actually join it because they don't have access to the questions. I have no idea what it's going to be. There's a $10 gift card up for grabs if you win an individual show, and a Lions jersey if you win the overall series. And I'd love to get as many people as we can in that. So if you can shout out the quiz when all of that happens, it would be really great for you guys to do that for us. College podcast starts tomorrow. So please, 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 please give that your support. I know that Ant has put a huge amount of work into it. It's the CUSA preview tomorrow for 2024. I think his prep work for that episode is something like 80 pages of written A4.
Yeah.
Which is like, what are you doing? Get a life. Levels of preparation. I love you, Ant, but my God, man. If you want to know anything about college football, and you don't at the moment, now's your chance. Listen to them tomorrow. Otherwise, you know where to find us on social media. Roar of the Lions UK, YouTube, Twitch, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok. Ash does a great job with the TikTok cutting up stuff and the Instagram reels and what have you, so go and check them out if you want to see some highlights from the show. Otherwise, website, rotluk.com, Facebook group for worldwide fans not affiliated to us, but it's a fun place to be. Detroit Lions fans UK, One Pride Worldwide. Lots of stuff from Ryan Farton, who was the International Fan of the Year on there. We were posting stuff on there from the tailgate we went to when we were in the draft. There's stuff that you won't see from us that's up there that's really worth seeing. Otherwise, just remains for me to thank all of our guests from today's show, to Ash and to Ryan, but then also to Jack and to Poole. And then apologies for Andrew from the Vikings why not being able to make it. We're going to invite him back, which is a family thing. He wasn't able to make it. Thank you to all of you for watching or listening. We'll see you tomorrow for the college show. For now, let's go Lions, One Pride.
One Pride.